for just a little bit. Oh, yeah, so look this way. Oh, great to be with you. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 11. Really have had a difficult time with Matthew chapter 11, I think more than normal and more than usual. Chapter 11, verse 1 we're dealing with. We tried to deal with it last Saturday night, and we're going to try again to look at it again. The difficulty is in the translation of the whole passage, and the difficulty is in wrapping my brain. You get into patterns in your thought process, obviously, and as you get into the pattern of the way they've translated it, and I'm not even saying they translated it wrong, but as you look at it in the translation and the way it reads, the variety of translations, I've looked at probably 20 or 30 of them, but the way they've translated it, it's hard for me to get my mind out of those translations and into the way it really is. And I'm not sure there's any way to really translate the way there really is. But that doesn't change the truth of the passage. It just says it's hard to say in the English. Did that make any sense? Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. And I think that there is a phenomenal truth in chapter 11, verse 1 that I need for my life. And that's why I am coming back to that again tonight. So we're looking at Matthew chapter 11, verse 1. Obviously, it's a playoff of chapter 10. Obviously, what's going on is, in fact, some Bible scholars actually take verse 1 and attach it to chapter 10 because Jesus has given this instruction for ministry. We know that they've had the prayer meeting in chapter 9, verse 38 and 37 and 38. He's reached down inside, grabbed all the power he contains within. He's transferred it to his disciples. They now are going to be sent out. They've gone from disciples in verse 1 to apostles in verse 2. And what made them apostles is the infilling of the Spirit of God that came from Jesus to them. So they are empowered not because they've finished a certain course or because they've read certain books or because they have accomplished certain feats or because they've had certain seminars. They are the apostles now because they have been enabled by the same Spirit of God that lives in Jesus has now enabled them. And the power is in verse 1 to overcome over unclean spirits, to cast them out, to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. We understand it's not a full-blown Pentecost, but it is certainly a preliminary to that whole scene. So he is going to send them out. Now, he gives them instruction, and the instruction, I want you to think through this again. The instruction that he gives them is in threefold. Number one, he highlights the idea of persecution, and then says, don't get all wrapped up in that. I'm going to highlight the idea of intimacy. I want you to be intimate with me. What you are to focus on is not what people do to you or don't do to you. Focus on being intimate with me. I'm going to whisper in your ear in the night hours. You're going to proclaim it in the world. Regardless of what that does or the consequences of that, don't get wrapped up in the consequences. Strictly focus on the fact that I'm so intimate with you, I can whisper to you in the night hours. So I want you to focus, he says, only on being like me in terms of not imitating me, but in terms of what's in me is in you, and we're together in this. And I want you to focus on that. So there's the persecution element, but don't focus on that. Focus on being like me. Then he comes up at the end of the instruction with the reward thing. He says, don't focus on the reward thing. Focus on being intimate with me, because I am the reward. So the whole deal is persecution, reward, but oh, please stay focused on me. Stay all wrapped up in what's sourcing you. Stay in the flow of what I'm giving you. Live in the power of that which now indwells you. Come on, focus, lock in. Don't let anything disturb that. Don't let anything distract you from that. Zero in on this, not persecution, not what you're going to get, not reward stuff. Focus in on the intimacy of my presence. Now, when he gets done with that, you come to chapter 11, verse 1. Now it came to pass when Jesus finished commanding his 12 disciples that he departed from there to teach and to preach. Now last time we did a little, and we need to do that again, we did a little sentence diagramming. The subject, obviously, of the whole passage is Jesus. Jesus brought it to pass. Jesus finished commanding. So obviously the subject of everything that's going on in the passage is Jesus, which is the way it ought to be. You'll notice in my translation it says, now it came to pass, like it is the subject. It is not the subject. Jesus is the subject. There isn't any question about that. So Jesus is the subject. Now, one question we tried to deal with last Saturday, and I want to highlight that again because it's so essential, is who is this Jesus? Well, number one, he's God. Nobody here argues about that. Nobody here is putting that down. Nobody here is saying that isn't so. We all believe Jesus is God. He's always been God. He'll always be God. There's never a time he's not God. We went over this strongly, didn't we? We'll do it again because you need to get it. We constantly want to highlight that. We don't want any misunderstanding, any time, any place, anywhere, under any circumstances about Jesus being God. Jesus is God. Folks, if that is absolutely essential, if he is not God, then all of this is meaningless. We're worshiping a nice guy. And there's lots of nice guys. Why don't you worship me? I'm nice too. Well, Jesus died. Well, lots of nice guys died. So we could find some nice guys to worship who died. But Jesus isn't just a nice guy. He is God. And that makes the difference. Our salvation is all wrapped up in the essence of Jesus being God. If he is not God, we're wasting our time. Jesus is God. Are you getting this? Jesus is God. We will not undermine that. We will not back off from that. We will shed blood on that. That is one. We can compromise on a lot of things. If you want to be sprinkled, I'll do that. If you want to be immersed, I'll do that. If you want to be turned upside down in the pool, I'll do that. If you want 3 times back and 5 times forwards, we'll do that. We can compromise on those, but we cannot compromise on this. Jesus is God, period. We will not budge on that. I feel better. So Jesus is God. Now, obviously, Jesus is not only God, Jesus is man. I know you've thought this through. Surely you've come to grips with this. He is man. Well, why would he become man? Because man got us into this mess. Or, if you really want to get technical, a woman got us into this mess. Just kidding. The problem is the man was there letting her do it. That was the problem. So we take responsibility. Come on, man up. We're responsible. So man got us into this mess. And if you say, well, that happened thousands of years ago and doesn't have anything to do with me, you got yourself into your mess. I mean, you turned right around and did what he did. Whatever Adam did, you've done it too. Hey, so you're responsible, so there's no way you can say, well, it was Adam, it was his fault, when you've turned it right around and done the same identical thing that he did. So man got us into this mess. So we have to admit we got ourselves into this mess. Well, who's going to get us out of this mess? God cannot get us out of this mess by himself. He cannot. He cannot just sit on his throne and wave a magic wand. This is not just pat you on the head stuff. This is not, well, you broke a window, I'll fix it and we'll act like it didn't happen. It's not that kind of thing. This is a radical, sin is a radical, internal, revolutionary change in the inner person of who you are. You are not who you were. When Adam sinned, he changed totally, absolutely. And there had to be a cure. There had to be a transformation. There had to be some way to bring him back. God couldn't just wave a magic wand and get that done. So God can't get us out of this mess. Man got us into this mess. God can't get us out of this mess. It's going to take another man to get us out of this mess. But the only man that can get us out of this mess is a man who isn't in the mess. Man got us into this mess. Man is going to have to get us out of this mess. But the only man that can get us out of this mess is a man who isn't already in the mess. See, I can pay for my sins. You can pay for your sins. I will pay for my sins. You will pay for your sins. I can't pay for your sins and my sins too, even if I want to. It's going to take all I can do just to pay for my own. Therefore, I'm in the mess, and I can't take care of this. So man got us into this mess. Man's going to have to get us out of this mess. But the only man that can get us out of this mess is a man who isn't in the mess. Now, why is it that man is the only one that can get us out of this mess? Because the wages of sin is death. And God cannot die. He is eternal and cannot die. Man can die, God can't die. So God hasn't got a shot at paying the penalty of this. So man has to get us out of this mess. And yet there's no man that isn't in the mess. So when God went looking for a man who wasn't in the mess, he couldn't find one. So God said, I'm going to make another man who isn't in the mess. Nah, I tried that and it didn't work. What I'm going to do this time is, I'm going to become the man. And God became man. Whoa! Who isn't in the mess? That is so awesome, folks. Hey, that's a whole year of theology in seminary. Come on, that's phenomenal. Man got us into this mess. Man's going to have to get us out of this mess. But the only man that can get us out of this mess is a man who isn't in the mess. But there is no man who isn't in the mess. So God became the man who isn't in the mess. And Jesus is the man. Now, what does it mean when he became man? He simply limited himself in his godness. All that he had as God, he set aside and limited himself to that which you have available to you. So Jesus, as a man, he's God. We understand that. He never gave up being God. But he simply set aside everything he had as God and limited himself to the resource that's available to you. So Jesus had no edge on you. Everything he had going on in him, you can have going on in you. If he can make it by the resource that was available to him, you can make it because you have the same resource available to you. And he was filled with the Spirit and operated as a Spirit-sourced man. So Jesus did not do what he did because he's God, although he is God. He did what he did because he's a man filled with God. Now, in the grammar of the passage, that's the Jesus we're dealing with. Matthew is so strong on that. And in the context, he's telling us from the very beginning, chapters 1 and 2, Jesus is God. Bold statements. He moves into, oh, he's been born. He's a man. Whoa, he's filled with the Spirit. John the Baptist scene in chapter 3. So the whole context of what's going on is that what you're seeing is not the actions of God on his own. You're seeing the actions of God through a man. So everything that Jesus is doing in the passages that we're dealing with, 8 and 9, the miracles are all about the flow of the Spirit of God through a man that's totally yielded it to God. What would happen if you were totally yielded to God and he was turned loose to do in you all he wanted to do? What would happen if every bit of your life would be sourced by him? Attitude, movement, where you go, total being, sourced by God. That's Jesus. The possibility is yours. So he's a Spirit-sourced man. Now in verse 1, chapter 11, he adds one interesting factor, and that is the word commanding. Commanding is not one of the main verbs of the passage. Jesus is the subject. But commanding is a participle which makes it an adjective modifying the Jesus. So it's the commanding Jesus. Now, we discovered last Saturday that the word command does not mean 1, 2, 3, 10 commandments. These are things I want you to do kind of stuff. It has the idea of ordering. It has the idea of flow. It has the idea of direction. It has that kind of feel to it. It is a military term. So it's not a term where put the bullet in your gun, put the gun to your shoulder, march out, aim it at the enemy. See, it's not. It's, hey, boys, take that hill kind of deal. So Jesus has not come giving you, get up in the morning, eat Wheaties for breakfast, pray for a half hour, read this chapter. See, no, he doesn't need to do that to you. Come on, you're an intelligent individual. You're filled with him. Get with the flow, he says. The flow of his Spirit. Not going to give you details. You're in on this. We're partners in this, he says. Come on, get with the flow of what I want to do in your life. Hey, come on, think. You got a brain? Let's get with it. I want to fill your brain, and in the intimacy of my presence in your brain, you and I will flow in the Spirit, and I don't need to give you 1, 2, 3. It'll be spontaneous. It'll happen in your life. So he's commanding them. That's what he's doing with his disciples in chapter 10. He's not giving them 1, 2, 3. He's saying, don't focus on persecution. Don't focus on reward. Focus on intimacy with me. And in the intimacy of me, you'll know what to do. It'll take place. It'll flow out of you. It'll begin to happen. So that's the impact. He's the commanding. He's Jesus, who's God, who's man, who's Spirit source, who's giving his disciples direction and flow and saying, join me in this. That's the Jesus we're dealing with. Now, this Jesus, he says, has done 2 things, and that's the 2 verbs of the passage. We dealt halfway with the first one last Saturday. The first verb, main verb in the passage is translated, it came to pass. It's the Greek word genomai. And the Greek word genomai means to come into being, to be. It's a creative kind of thing. It's used sometimes as a state of being. So it means to exist. So he says, hey, in the context of our passage, he's talking about ministry. He says Jesus brought into being this ministry. Now, remember, don't get confused. If Jesus brought into being this ministry, yeah, well, the disciples were following Jesus around as we've talked on Sunday. He called them. They're following him around. Jesus is doing all the miracles. Jesus is telling all the parables, dealing with all the people. They're just kind of hanging around, watching, and disciples following him wherever he goes and getting some on-the-job training. They're not really participating in the ministry, except maybe as ushers and bouncers. So here they are. This is their role. Now Jesus says, listen, I'm not going to carry this anymore. Hey, I've done all the miracles. I'm not going to do all the miracles anymore. I'm going to duplicate myself in you. And he's creating this ministry. He's given them on-the-job training, now instruction, and he's going to send them out. They're going to go out and be exactly what he's been to his world. So as they go out, Jesus is creating, it came to pass, genomai, brought into being in the context of our passage. Now keep in mind, remember, Jesus isn't creating the ministry. Oh, yes, he is. Well, no, he's not. Well, who is the Jesus? He's God, I know, but he's man, Spirit-sourced. So it's the Spirit of God within him that's sourcing all of this that's bringing the ministry into being. So while it's Jesus in the passage who's creating this, it's the Jesus who's Spirit-sourced, and he is bringing into existence a whole new realm of ministry, filling them, sending them out. Has he done that to you? Well, sure he is. It's his dream. This is not, you stay home in the lazy chair, I'll take care of it kind of stuff. We've never proposed that. This is not, you don't worry about it, you take a nap, I'll handle it while you're asleep. We've never proposed that. This is the Jesus who comes to live in you, who says, I want to create a flow through you that'll get you dirty and messy and wear you out. But all the time you'll know you're not doing it. You're living in the flow because you're going beyond what you're capable of. And you become the vessel through which I create a whole new phenomenal ministry. He did that then. He's doing that now. Are you available? Now, we came up, I told you last Saturday that there are 4 usages for this word ginomai, 4 ways it's used in the New Testament. And this, obviously, it's being used here in verse 1. Well, this word ginomai, create, to be, to exist, how is it used in this passage? If there's 4, which one is the way it's used here? Well, it's used as all 4 of them. All 4 of them apply. Now, we dealt with the issue of to come into existence, which is the first one. So to come into existence, and we just discussed that. It's a state of existence. So he's bringing into existence a new state of ministry. The disciples are going to be in the middle of it. The number 2 that we dealt with was the origin through an agency. In other words, while we're still focusing on the fact that something new is taking place in terms of ministry, when you add the second idea to it, it is a focus on, there's someone who's actually brought this into being. We're still talking about being brought into being, the creative idea, but there's a force, a flow, a person behind the creativity of this. And obviously, it is the Spirit of God. Ministry, folks, is not a product of the church. If you are sent out by the church, you will get discouraged and quit because the church will let you down. You'll get into a situation and the church will say, that's too messy for us to handle. We're going to abandon you. We'll do that to you because we're not very nice. You've heard it before. If you're looking for the perfect church, please don't come here because we were perfect until you showed up. And then we went downhill. We're not trying to be a perfect church. We're not trying to have perfect services. We're not trying to be a church that doesn't have any arguments. We're not trying to be a church that doesn't have any strife. We're not trying to be a church that doesn't have cigarette butts in its parking lot. We're not trying to be a church that doesn't have that there isn't rocky movements. We're not trying to be a church where everything is smooth. That's not us. That isn't the church. We want imperfect people. That's why we like you guys so much. We like people who are messy. We want you. And if you can't stand messes, this is not the place for you. You go find a perfect church. Ministry is found not by ordained. The church did not bring ministry into existence. Jesus, sourced by the Spirit, brings ministry into existence. And this has nothing to do with organizational structure. This has to do with what's burning in your bones. This has nothing to do with what we say you can do or can't do. This has to do with what burns in your system, and you just can't help yourself because you just can't contain it. You just have to. If we can talk you out of it, then it doesn't burn in your bones. Moving along. Number 3. That's where we ended last Saturday. Number 3, the third usage of this word ginomai. We're talking about verse 11. We're talking about Jesus brought into existence. This whole ministry thing. The third use for this word ginomai is what came into existence is a result. In other words, cause and effect. Ministry is an effect. What caused it? It didn't just come out of the blue. Oh, wow. Do you realize? Oh, you got to get a hold of this. Do you realize that what's going on in this passage, when the disciples are literally filled with what's going on in Jesus, and he sends them out, and they're going to go through all of Galilee and literally disrupt their world, do you realize that is intimately, distinctly tied to Abraham? What's Abraham got to do with it? If Abraham hadn't been, this wouldn't be. Do you realize Moses on Mount Sinai receiving the law is directly related to these boys having the Spirit of God deposited within them and going out and flowing in ministry to reach their world? That is connected. This is the effect of that cause. Do you realize Hosea and all the old-time prophets and the messages, Daniel, Jeremiah, all those boys, they are the cause. This is the effect. If that hadn't been, this wouldn't be. Do you realize if Isaiah hadn't stood on his hind legs and talked about a virgin who was going to give forth a birth to a guy who would be called Emmanuel, if that hadn't been, this wouldn't be. Ministry is not isolated. Well, it's nobody's business but my own. It's everybody's business. That is an immense concept, folks. Well, that's the church down the road. They don't have anything to do with us. Yes, they do. What they do directly affects what we're doing. This is cause and effect. We are interrelated. There's no way to be isolated in this. And everything that has gone on in the church history, bringing us to this moment, we are. And folks, we literally, do you realize that when you, think of this. Do you realize when you pick this book up and you just turn a page, it's dripping with the blood of men and women who actually sacrificed their lives so you could have this thing. That's phenomenal. Don't treat this so lightly. Do you realize when we sit here or stand here and we worship together, we have the privilege of that because men and women literally gave their life's blood to provide and believed and would not budge on that issue. See, we're here with the possibility of ministry because this is an effect of the cause of everything that's gone on. People don't treat that lightly. Come on, get with the flow, he says. Because this is really a big deal. Now, in our passage, you see that. Because Matthew is constantly using the idea of prophecy. And he's saying, this Jesus, who's God, yes, he's a man, yes, he's spirit-filled, spirit-sourced, yes, and he is giving them a flow and a direction, and the direction is ministry. And he's saying to them, come on, guys, don't focus on persecution. Don't focus on what you're going to get in heaven. Come on, focus on intimacy. And in the intimacy, realize that possibility of intimacy and the flow of God through you, which affects your world, is a result of all the cause that's gone on before you. And you are not on your own on this. The fourth way that ginomai is used is a change of state or condition. In other words, it's not a new thing. Ministry, as Jesus is bringing, you look at this passage and say, oh, yeah, Jesus is doing a new thing among his disciples. He's launching them into ministry. Oh, it's brand new. It's never been done before. Well, it's been around, but it's been in a different shape, a different form. Well, they're going to go out and do miracles. Yeah, but you can go through the Old Testament and find miracles as well. Not like this. Well, kind of like this. Well, it's same. Well, it has the same smell about it, but it's a different kind of it's the same substance, but it's taking a different form. Let me lay this on you. Jesus showed up the first time. born in a manger. God finally arrived on earth. We don't believe that. We believe that God was here all the time. Well, certainly he was in the Old Testament. That's right. You mean Jesus was in the Old Testament? Well, absolutely. Look into a fiery furnace. Go back to creation, Paul says. There he was. The Word that brought everything into a being. So Jesus has been around a long time. Oh, I thought he just showed up on earth. No. Well, didn't God just finally come to earth when Jesus? No. You mean he'd been here all the time? Yes. Well, what was the birth of Christ? It was a new manifestation of the God who was already present. That make sense? Because God had not abandoned us. Well, what about the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament? God wasn't doing any speaking. Yeah, he was gearing up for this one mighty, whoo, here he is. And it was a change, not in condition, it was a change in form. It was the same God who's been here all the time. He never left us. Jesus is a manifestation of the God who's been here all the time. Jesus is going to come back the second time. Yes! But wait a minute, could I propose to you? He's never left. He's here now. Well, then what's the second coming? It's not an absent God showing up. Well, God finally came back. Well, isn't that good? Like he hasn't been here? He's been here all the time. What's the second coming? Not an absent God that's out there showing up here. It's the God who's here in a brand new manifestation of who he is. When he shows up the second time, new manifestation of the God who's already been here, you're going to look at him and say, whoa, there he is. I've been waiting for him to come back. How are you going to respond? If you got any sense, you're going to fall at his feet saying, whoa, man, I've been in a mess. You can take over. I mean, things haven't been going too well. You can now handle it. Hey, my finances have been, woo, you can take over my bills. Wow, my family, my wife, oh, mercy, you can handle the whole outfit. You're going to relax and give everything to him because Jesus, who's Lord, is back. Well, if he's been here all the time, why don't you do that now? In fact, that's the test. That you do that now by faith. When he shows up the second time, there he is. You won't need faith, you can see him. And when he shows up the second time, a God who's already here, showing up in a new manifestation, I'm going to say, I told you, I told you, I told you. There he is. So if you will do by faith now what you're going to do by sight, then you'll be in. That's the test. That's the whole test. Will you trust Jesus now by faith the way you're going to trust him then by sight? And his second coming is not an absent God showing up. It's simply the same God who's been here all the time, manifesting himself in a brand new way. What does that have to do with anything? It's the same substance, different form. You go to church on Sunday morning, they have stained glass windows. That's churchy. They read out of this book. That's churchy. They sing they sing the old hymns. That's churchy. They have the same language. That's churchy. They do all the church stuff. But the issue is, does it have the substance? Is it plastic? Or is it made out of the same substance that's always been? That's the issue of the passage. The disciples are going to go out. Jesus is creating a whole new deal. not a new substance. It's the same substance that had been rolling through him is now going to roll through them. So it's the same old thing, the same old movement of the Spirit, the same old victory by God indwelling you, the same old deal about God giving us victory. It's the same old, it's the same, says the same feel, it has the same aroma, it has the same perfume smell, it's the same. And what gives me victory gives you victory. It's the same deal. And man, if you can't have victory, then I can't either. And if it's not possible for you, then it's not possible for me. Because there's only one substance here. And Jesus has brought into being, ginomai, a whole new realm of ministry. The second verb, I got to hurry. The second verb in the passage, Jesus is the subject, ginomai is the first verb. We probably beat that to death. Now, we'll go to the second verb, finished. Finished is the second verb. It's literally the Greek word teleo, which is the word for perfect, which has the idea of completing, accomplishing, bringing to fruition, that kind of idea. It's, again, has the idea of fulfilling the purpose, perfect. Now, guess what? There's 3 ways this verb is used. Well, which one is it used in this passage? All 3 of them. Glad you're excited about it. The first one is the fulfillment of purpose, which is perfect or purpose. Perfect. For instance, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. He's talking about God lets it rain on the just and on the unjust. If you love the ones who treat you nice, you're no better than the publicans, or was it republicans? Anyhow, the publicans, you're no better than the publicans because they do that same thing. I want you to love your enemies, and God lets it rain on the just and the unjust. Then he climaxes that whole thing by saying, therefore, you shall be perfect. Did you hear that, Joel? You're going to be perfect. You are perfect, just as, and you say, well, perfect in what way? Just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Whoa! That's a statement and a half, isn't it? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now, that word perfect is the same identical Greek word group that our word comes from. Perfect in what way? It means you're going to have no flaws in your appearance. Get that out of your head. It means you're going to be perfect in all your activities. Get that out. It means you can cancel the insurance on your vehicle. Get that out of your head. You're going to be a perfect driver. Get that out of your head. It means that you're never going to miss another question on the test at school. You're going to be perfect in your knowledge. Get that out of your head. It means perfect in the sense of accomplishing the purpose for which you were built. The scholars give the old illustration that I've heard all my life. You have 2, screwdriver. You got a screwdriver. This is a perfect screwdriver. Oh, it has scars on the handle. Yeah. In fact, it's got a gouge in the end of the screwdriver, close to the end of the screwdriver, where I got the thing into the electrical and it burned out. But it is a perfect screwdriver with all of its scratches, with all of its cuts, with all of it's a perfect screwdriver because it perfectly fulfills the purpose for which it exists. Now, put that into the context of this passage. Oh, you got to hear this. Put that into the context of this passage. Jesus has taken a group of 12 disciples. They've followed him around. He's done all the miracles. He's done all the ministry. They've just kind of hung around and ate the free food. He's saying, hey, we're moving to another level, guys. I'm going to take what's inside of me, transfer it to you, and Jesus has created a whole new wave of ministry. And when he got done accomplishing the creation of that whole new wave of ministry, it's finished. Well, you mean it's all over? No, it's not over. They're just getting started. I know. It's not over in the sense of it's done, wipe your hands, we'll all quit. It's over, it's done, it's finished in the sense of that it is perfect in its focus and in its purpose. There's a whole purpose here, that God has created 12 disciples for a whole new purpose. In the context of our Sunday morning study, he's called them to get off of fishing for fish and to be fishers of men. New purpose. And they are perfectly prepared for it. I want to ask you a question, or let me just make a statement. I can think of nothing more tragic than to spend one single minute not fulfilling the purpose for which God filled you for. Please do not waste your time missing the overwhelming purpose of God for your life. Please don't come up 70 years of age and say, what a waste. What a waste. God has overwhelming purpose for you. You say, what is that purpose? None of my business. That's your business with him. But he has filled you with a distinct you can be perfect in the sense of fulfilling the purpose, the dream of God for your life. Whew. Don't miss that. Well, I'm not educated. That doesn't have anything to do with it. Well, I've got an abusive past. Doesn't have anything to do with it. There's no excuse that you can lay out to let you off of the purpose. Why? Because this isn't about you. This is about the Spirit of God that now has been transferred to you or can be transferred to you. And you can be filled with him and the purpose for which God's dream for your life. Whew. Awesome. Don't spend one single moment not fulfilling the purpose. Number 2, usage of the word. So the first usage for finished is the idea of purpose or perfection, which is fulfilling the purpose. The second idea is production. It is the idea of the accomplishment of completion. In other words, in the context of our passage, Jesus has taken the power he contains within. He's carried the weight of this whole thing. He's been doing all the miracles. He's been doing all the ministry. They've been following around. Now there's a change taking place. He's reached inside of himself, grabbed all the power within, transferred it to his disciples. He's sending them out, and they are going to accomplish, complete the dream and the mission of God. This word that we're dealing with, which is translated finished here, teleo, is also used at the cross. Think about this. Jesus hangs on the cross. And just before he gives up his last breath, he says, "It is finished." This word. It's completed. Now this is not and we indicated this earlier, but this is not a static thing. In other words, this is not completed in, it's all over, there's nothing more to do. It isn't that. It's completed in the sense that the whole thing has been kicked to a new level. In other words, Jesus is going to ascend, so that isn't completed. Jesus is going to pour out the Spirit, so that isn't completed. Jesus is going to do that in life after life after life after life, again and again and again. So that isn't completed. It isn't that Jesus is on a vacation now because he's done his work. It isn't that. It's that this whole thing has been kicked to a whole new level, and the accomplishment of that new level, of the flow of this, is now going to take place. Now, if you put that in the context of chapter 10, he's given them this instruction. Don't focus on persecution. Don't focus on reward. Focus on intimacy. He reached inside, transferred it to them. They've now got the power for ministry flowing through them, and they've literally been kicked to a whole new level of activity and purpose. The most frustrating thing I know is to try to be like Jesus when you're still in this level down here. It's awful. To try to be what you ought to be when you're on this level here. To try to minister. People are so irritating. They are. Aren't you glad you're not people? People are so irritating. They don't pay attention. They don't listen to you. They don't respond like they ought to. They don't. They're a bunch of... And when you minister on this level down here, they'll irritate the life out of you. The only chance you've got for ministry is to come to the completed level. What's going on in the passage is the dynamic of the Jesus who's literally accomplished, brought them to a whole new level of the outspill of the Spirit. Let me give you the last. It's permission. I love this. The third way this word is used in verse 1 is permission, or allowing, or permitting. Don't focus on persecution. Don't focus on reward. He says, focus on intimacy, which gives you the permission to spill yourself out. One of the great things about grace is you can be wasteful. Liberally, extravagantly wasteful. Just throw it away. It's okay. Now, if you focus on getting the job done, then you become self-sourced, and you've got to be stingy. If you're focused on results, what are the results? Well, if I do this, this, and this, we get these results. If we don't get these results, I'm not doing that. When you focus on results, then you get stingy and you get self-sourced. You measure. If you're task-oriented, then do you know what that does to you? You begin to talk about, what's the investment and how much did it cost us? And see, this is altogether different. This is, I give you permission just to... Isn't it interesting how wasteful Jesus was? He takes his power. He heals 10 lepers. What a waste. 9 of them go off and you never hear about them at all. Only one comes back to even say thanks. I'd have just healed the one and dumped the other 10 or other 9. I would have saved my grace. Not him. Isn't it interesting? He dies on a cross for everybody. That was dumb. I'd have just half died for the ones. A quarter died because only a quarter of them are going to get in anyhow. An eighth of them, few there be that find it. I'd have just given one hand for the few. Save the rest. He's extravagantly wasteful. But then love is like that, folks. You can waste it. And the interesting thing is, the more you waste and the more you spill it out and the more you give it away, the more you have. So let's just be extravagantly wasteful with forgiveness and love and embracing and just, wow. We can afford it. One last thought. In the context, this is really awesome. In the context, Jesus has been doing all the miracles and had all the ministry and been doing the stuff, and they've just been, now we're going to a new level. He's taken the power within, transferred it to them. He has created, brought into being, through the fullness of the Spirit, this new level of ministry has now been accomplished. He's going to send them out. And what is Jesus doing while they go out? Oh, look at the last of the verse. And it came to pass, when Jesus finished commanding his 12 disciples, that he departed from there to teach and to preach in their cities. So while they were out, accomplishing ministry that he's been doing in Galilee, what is he doing? He goes to what is said in the passage, to preach and to teach in their cities. Now the question is, their cities, what is that? There is division on it among the commentators. Some think it was their cities, meaning the cities of Galilee. But that's where the disciples have gone, so I'm not buying that. Their cities, there's absolute, it could be, it fits so perfectly in the passage to consider their cities to be their hometowns. So the passage is, when you are filled with the Spirit, and Jesus is accomplishing, bringing to perfection, fulfilling the purpose, you are flowing in the fullness of His Spirit, and He is ministering through you on this new level, that while that's happening, you know what Jesus has taken on personally to do? Minister to your family. That's awesome. So if I want Jesus to minister to my family, I would allow the fullness of the Spirit to accomplish in me the purpose for which He's filled me, whatever that is. It's a hard analysis, Lord, to come tonight and to allow you to remind me with great embarrassment of where I've wasted my time not fulfilling your purpose. And I've not been extravagant, wasteful in love, forgiveness, and grace. I've been stingy, hoarding, and I missed your purpose. And whatever the situations are that are in my life at this moment, and to think of, how did I get here? This is an effect of a cause, and it's the reason I'm here at this moment, in the situations in which I'm in, a direct result of you fulfilling your purpose through the fullness of the Spirit. Don't let me miss for one more second your dream, your purpose for my life. Could I kneel before you tonight? And could you reestablish? I've been focused on the persecution, what people have said or didn't say, what they were, what they were not. I've been focused on the reward. What am I going to get? What's the results? What's the benefits? Could I tonight focus on you and the flow of your life in and through me in a new way? And would you please give me a spirit that will allow me to be generous, lavish, extravagant, wasteful, just spilling out love and spilling out forgiveness. Just dump it out, wasting it on everyone around me. Please, could that be the purpose for which you filled me? Heads are bowed. Just some moments of seeking, responding, praying. Don't waste one single moment of your time not fulfilling the purpose of God for your life. Seek Him out. Be obedient.